Hilary Phelps. Welcome to the Carrie Croft Show.
Thank you, Carrie Croft. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Hilary. I feel like there's an energy here. I like it.
Yes.
We're like little minxes together. Little sweaty. We did. We worked out together. We set the tone.
We did.
And now you're clean.
Yeah.
And I'm dirty. But nobody would know that had I not let the cat out of the bag. You are the OG of the Phelps family in terms of swimming. You sort of, you like set the tone for Whitney and Michael, right?
I did.
Because you're the eldest. You jumped in the pool. You happen to be talented. And then they kind of came along because you were at the pool.
Mm-hmm. And I liked it. I started swimming at 7. And that was the year my brother was born, on the summer swim team because it's, what you do. You put your kids on a summer swim team, and I loved it. And I was pretty good. At the end of that year, I got 3rd place trophy. And I said to my mom, I want the big trophy. I want the big one. And she said, well, that's summer swim or that's winter swimming. The kids with the big trophies are the ones that swim year round. Do you want to swim year round? I'm like, yes. And so I started doing that and started swimming year round. And I was a distance swimmer. So which meant I swam the mile and the longer freestyle events. So I started trained with a lot of the older kids, and I got the big trophies. And so my sister started swimming shortly after, and then Michael joined 5 years after that.
You know what's interesting, because I'm a terrible swimmer.
Yeah.
And it's not like I didn't do swim team or anything else like that, but when I get in the water, I always wish, I can't even really freestyle. Like I can doggy paddle and save my life.
Yes.
But I have such a respect for people who swim. It looks so hard to me. Like the butterfly, what were you best at?
So the mile and the 200 butterfly.
Like
you can't fake a 200 butterfly.
No.
The mile you can go slow and kind of swim, but a 200 butterfly you can't.
Now, do you still swim?
No. I've been saying for the past, I think the last time I really swam was when I was pregnant with Alexander. I have a 6-year-old. And I keep saying I want to get back in the water because it does feel good and it's a great workout, but there's still that kind of the trauma from getting up at, 3:45 in the morning and swimming twice a day and staring at the black line for hours and hours. But once I'm there, I love it. The motivation to get there is the problem.
I was wondering if there was any emotional baggage that came with swimming.
A lot of swimmers are like, I can't get back in the water. Some do masters, like 50-50. Some do masters and they love it. And then some are like, I can't.
You just came out in 2022 with your sobriety journey.
Yes.
Which is amazing and incredible. And your first podcast was with your friend Pete, which I listened to in great detail. Yeah. So let's talk first about how I'm amazed at the fact that you waited 15 years and didn't tell anyone, the shame that came with that. Mm-hmm. So I would think the shame started with childhood. Mm-hmm. I'm not supposed to say anything. I have to be perfect. I'm this great swimmer. I'm doing everything correctly, so I can't really say anything. Is that how it started, where you're like, I don't want to tell anyone?
So I had to let go of the perfectionism when I got sober, right? So it wasn't that. Meaning, when I first got sober, I went to rehab, I went to treatment, and I said, I'm going to quit drinking alcohol. I was smoking cigarettes at the time. I'm going to quit smoking cigarettes. I'm going to quit drinking caffeine. I'm going to quit drinking Diet Coke. I'm going to quit eating real sugar. I'm going to become a vegan, and I'm going to run a marathon. And then I will be perfect. Then I'll be perfect. It was my definition of, and the perfection. And the rehab was like, just don't drink today. All you have to do is not drink today. I'm like, thank you. Okay, I got it. So I kind of had to let go of what perfectionism looked like. But for me, I think there's a lot of shame around women in addiction anyway. I think there's a double standard in just drinking and just culture. And when it comes to women, a man can go out and have this wild night and you talk about how, oh my gosh, dude, that was so incredible. But if a girl has somewhat of an equally, you behave better, be better.
Be a lady.
Be a lady. And, we talked a little bit about this morning. And so for me, there was still a lot of that shame, of I'm a woman and I should know better, and then I was also kind of in a relationship for a long time where I was told it was very shameful, which just perpetuated that shame of why this is what I think and I'm being told, so it must be true. And so I didn't say anything. And so the relationships and the friendships that I made once I got sober, they just thought I was just healthy or I didn't drink or it was just a choice, but nobody knew that I quit drinking because I had a problem with addiction.
I look back on my childhood too, when I was did you start drinking? You were 14, 15?
14.
Same. right? And I would take like a bottle of Asti Spumani that was in the garage or something, and my friends and I would go into these
Sounds
like,
fancy. I don't know what that is.
way fancier than Boone's Farm. I know that's where you started. I listened to that and I was like, oh, girl after my own heart. Nothing like standing outside the liquor store looking for somebody who's over 21 trying to get some Boone's Farm. Like seriously, been there. That's how it starts. Like the gateway of like, next thing you know, you're drinking heavily and you're like blacking out. And I was actually taken with so much about your story. But the one thing I was so taken by was you had this natural gift of swimming. You're able to swim and kind of be this picture of everything's, look at her, she's amazing. And you're drinking, and then you're drinking more and you're drinking more. And those things started to sort of like, as you went into college, like the drinking just became out of control, right? Where you're getting bruises and you're not remembering things. You don't like who you are.
Well, and to start, like on the outside, I had all of the things that looked great. I was a straight A student. I was the fastest swimmer in the country. My parents were supportive and wonderful. We lived in a home. I played outside with my siblings. Like everything was fine. But at some point, and this is where I think it's so important to know that that addiction is a disease and it's not a decision. At some point, the drinking took over everything, and I never thought I was good enough, even though I had all these things that were telling me otherwise. And so, and then when I went to college, it was like, well, that's what you're supposed to do in college. And then going back to what, where you were talking about drinking the champagne, the sparkling wine, and like smoking the cigarette. Like, I feel like that's what we're shown too, right? Like we're shown that that's what you do at the end of the day to relax. So like the mommy wine culture and the cigarette, like this is what you do. We want to escape the feelings of whatever, sadness, happiness. We want to celebrate, like whatever that is. And the way to do that is to drink. And so, or eat ice cream or whatever. And some things are just less harmful. But for someone that's identifies, and this is with someone with substance use disorder, addiction, alcoholism, pick the term, it's not that simple, because once we start putting it in our bodies, we can't stop. And so when I went to college, I was like, well, this is what you do in college. It doesn't matter. Like school doesn't matter. Grades don't matter. I don't know what I'm going to do when I get older. But while I'm here, I'm going to have a 4-year party and it's going to be great. I had a full scholarship, full athletic scholarship. And so I started drinking. And the thing about being an addict in college is, and you can find anybody at any time to participate with you, so if like your roommate has a test, you can find your suite mate and they're going to drink, they're going to drink with you. And so it was really common to drink and to black out. And I thought that everybody else felt the same way I did. And what I mean by that is when I woke up in the morning with a hangover, it's really bad. But I thought everybody's hangover was like that, because someone's like, oh, I have a hangover. But maybe they had 2 drinks the night before where I had 8. Yeah. And it just wasn't the same. But I was still functioning and I was still able to get up and go to practice and go to class. And so I didn't think it was an issue.
Back to the shame part of it. So with your relationship, your previous relationship, when you say like, so your ex, you weren't supposed to be in recovery. It was more like, she just doesn't drink because she's healthy.
Correct. So the label of addiction or addict or sober or recovery was it was something that was shameful, and what I realized was like that kept me sick, right? So living, because we recover in the light and shame happens in the dark. And so the more things that we keep, and that's why things like 12 steps and community and sober curious spaces are so important, because you don't feel alone or isolated. And, when I went to treatment, I they were going around the room. It's a group therapy type setting. And I was so ashamed to share that I used to sneak drinks. I'm in a treatment center. And they were like, okay, well, I have this secret.
They've seen worse.
Exactly. I was like, well, I just have to tell you, like, I used to sneak drinks. I used to drink out of the bottle. And they were like, yeah, me too. Me too. I did that too. And I was like, really? And then I'm like, okay. And you can kind of release the shame of that because someone else did it too. And so the power of being around other people that are struggling, or the power, and I can say, okay, well, sometimes I blacked out. And they're like, me too. I'm like, okay, I always blacked out. And they're like, me too. I'm like, oh, okay, really? And you can just identify and have that connection. And it was
right. Because
it decreases the shame.
I look at that and I'm like, well, no wonder you didn't want to talk about it, because did anybody ever say, good job? Like, this is really cool that you're doing this. I mean, it's hard. That's what I feel like should have been said to you at some point, where it's like, this is real. I'm proud of you. I see what you're doing. Like, you clearly are not drinking and you're doing your best. Like, good job. And instead of that, I feel like people were sort of like pushing you aside, like just shh. And no wonder. No wonder it was 2022 and you came out. Well, you know what I mean? And it's like,
years,
and how good that must have felt for you to finally be like, this is me. I'm messy. I'm imperfect. I've fucked up, but I'm ready to move forward. And like, I am sober 15 years.
Yeah.
Like, raise the roof. Raise the fucking roof.
Where were you 16 years ago?
You know what I'm saying? You needed a cheerleader. Like, like somebody to say, like, this is really, keep going. Like, this is cool what you're doing. I see you.
Thank you. I mean, look, like I love validation, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I think
who
as humans,
doesn't?
we
But
all love validation.
yeah.
And so when I got sober, I wanted that. Like I wanted someone to say, oh my gosh, you're amazing. But the fear of going back out and drinking overtook the need for that validation. Like I'd been in so much pain, like emotional pain, I had physical pain when I got sober. And so I just kept going, on my own. And we didn't talk about it a lot in my family because and I talked to my mom later. I just talked to my mom recently about this. And she said, Hilary, I didn't understand it. I didn't know how to support you. I didn't know what to say. And so I didn't say anything. Right. And sometimes that does feel like they're being dismissive. And so that's why I also think talking about this is so important to let people know, it's okay to talk. It's okay to ask questions, because nobody in my family had identified as an alcoholic, an addict, problem drinker. Nobody had been to treatment. Nobody had been to a 12-step meeting. And so when I did this, I researched it on my own. I walked into a treatment center for the first time by myself, and it was but I started surrounding myself with other people in the program that were, in 12 steps in recovery that were doing the same thing. And that they became my rehab, my family in that way. And I had a friend, Claire, my first year. We did everything together. She came to Thanksgiving with me. We would go to yoga class. We did everything. I mean, everything, because I needed that someone that understood. And she had kind of had the same thing. Her family didn't really understand. So it was like, we just did it together. And that was really helpful, and I shared with you, my dad was really supportive. He was always like, I see you. And and so he still didn't ask questions because he didn't understand it, but he's like, good job. I'm proud of you. And then, recently, last year, my mom said, after we went to Ashley Addiction Treatment and work with them, and they're in Maryland, and we went to a luncheon. It was a women's luncheon. It was co-founded by a woman. So every year they talk about, women in sobriety and recovery. And we gone to the luncheon and we're walking out, and my mom stops and she looks and she's like, I had no idea. I had no idea how hard it is for a woman to get sober and stay sober. She said, I'm so proud of you. I said, thank you. And kind of kept going. And now she's kind of come around and she's like, she goes, I just didn't understand it. And so I didn't know how I could help you.
It's going back to what you said, that people or your mom or whoever didn't know what to say, so they didn't say anything. And that transcends with a lot of things in life, like whether you're you lose someone with grief. My thing is to always tell people, when you're in a situation where you don't know what to say something. Like, say something, because, it's just like, for example, just someone saying, I'm proud of you. Those 4 words will stick with you. You put it in here and you go back to that, and that's all you needed was that. So it's like, always say, even if you have 2 left feet, just say something.
How are you doing?
To let that person know that you feel that you see them and you understand, But going back and I was putting myself into, some of these moments that I was reading and listening to with you. When you were drinking, talk through when you would get on the train and you had of course it's a coffee cup, like we're did you do that every day? Mm-hmm. So that it was literally, you couldn't go a day without drinking, like being the next goal. Every second is the next goal of when's my next drink.
It's all I thought about.
So you go to work.
Sure.
And then talk through when you get on the train and then what that looks like.
So I get up in the morning and I would take a travel coffee tumbler, with coffee in the morning. And because I took the commuter train into Washington, D.C., and I'd get in the commuter train and I'd take that in, I'd drink my coffee and I'd wash it out when I got to work. And at the end of the day, you get on Union Station, there's a little liquor store, and they have, you can buy anything, but they have little traveler, I don't know, Sutter.
Yeah,
home,
little Sutter home. The little,
Sutter home?
They come like the 4-pack.
buy
Well, they're
those.
little, so they're okay.
It's like,
I mean, that's just like the rationalization too. Like,
and so I'd buy two of
tiny.
them and I'd pour them. I'd go in the bathroom and I'd pour them in my coffee cup. And so they just thought people just on the trains thought I was drinking coffee, because people who aren't problem drinkers, they would give you the little bottle and then they would give you a Dixie cup. It was like a clear Dixie cup that you'd get in like a dentist office. And they would pour it in and they would sip and they'd have a conversation. I'm like, I don't have time for that. I want to drink. Like, I want to drink this. And so when I get home, I'm already a little bit ahead. I've got a head start, and then I can start drinking, and then I go home and drink 2 bottles of wine. And
it was all wine, right?
I mean, I would drink anything you put in front of me, but my choice was
wine,
because it was it wasn't, because you can't have a problem if you're drinking wine,
because it's like upper crust.
Right. I'm not drinking out of a pipe or bottle. I'm drinking out of a coffee cup.
Correct. I know.
And it's wine.
I did hear something about Goldschlager though. You mentioned Goldschlager somewhere. I know, like Rumplemans or like all that. Like that's insane.
I had a Goldschlager at a bottle. I was in high school, and it was in the back of my car. And I remember thinking, I was at a stoplight. I remember exactly where I was in Towson, and I'm driving up, and I was mad. I was uncomfortable. I was sitting there, and I'm like, you know what would help right now? Goldschlager. And you know what? I have it in the back seat. And there was something that told me that taking a sip would take me out of the situation of the feelings I was in and make me feel better. So I reached back at 16 years old and grabbed this bottle of Goldschlager and drank it in my car. And I was like, whoa.
But then then all of a sudden you're like,
my parents didn't drink. My parents weren't drinkers. I mean, they drank, but they weren't drinkers, And so that came from somewhere. Like, this is going to make me feel better.
On the weekends when you were at the height, because at work you can't drink, right? I mean,
Right.
so you kind of have that clock going where you have 8 hours where you can't drink. But on the weekends you had mentioned like doing anything you did, you were drinking, right? So when you got up in the morning on a weekend, when did the first drink start?
So I thought it was like fancy, right? I'm like, oh, I'm going to have it's Saturday. I'm going to have a Bloody Mary. You could kind of rationalize it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I'm going to do that and I'm going to clean. I'm like, well, it's a Saturday. You're relaxing. It's what you're supposed to do, And so it was always appropriate to the time, So I never drank vodka. I never drank scotch in the morning. It was always a Bloody Mary or a mimosa, So it was like appropriate because that's, or wine in the morning. And then my sister one time came over and I was like, we're going to the grocery store, and we had like a bottle of wine and we poured our tumblers and we'd go to the grocery store, and she's like, do you drink to go to the grocery store? I'm like, sometimes it makes it fun. Like, you could just justify and rationalize it. But there were some mornings I was so hungover, I just wouldn't drink, And there was one time I tried to quit drinking. I was just in bed all day. And my dad showed up, it was my birthday. And he just knocked on the door, and I was so just hungover, I couldn't get out of bed. And I didn't want to get out of bed. So I shuffled to the door and I'm like, hi. He's like, happy birthday. I'm like, thanks. It's 25. I mean, it was in my 20s. And I just remember him being like, he didn't say I'm disappointed. He's just like, I'm worried about you. And that's kind of when they saw the slide. Because most of the time they wouldn't see that. I would drink at family functions and I'd go home and drink more. I'd show up drunk. But they didn't see it every single day, so they didn't see what it was really like on the backside of that hungover. I used to sit in the shower in the morning. I would wake up before work, and my kidneys would be in pain, and I would sit in the floor of the shower, and I'd bring my knees to my chest, and I'd wrap my arms around them, and I put my head on my knees and cry, and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't do this tonight. I'm physically in pain. And by noon, I'd take the commuter train into work with my coffee, and then by noon, I'm like, it's going to be different tonight. I feel better. And I would go back to that. And it was kind of the cycle of what the drinking had gone to.
What do you think, because you had mentioned earlier, when we talked about this earlier, like the mommy wine culture and just how accessible and acceptable drinking is. You have wine to like anything, to unwind, to your kids are annoying you, whatever. Does that like rub you? It has to. Where you're like, God, let's stop drinking. Like, let's just.
Because for some people, it could be okay. At the end of the day, like, I think the perpetuation of the idea of this is what you do when you're stressed, I don't think it's good for anybody, right? But we do it with anything. Let's just say with ice cream. With like now I'm like, gosh, I'm having a really bad day. Ice cream's going to make me feel better. It's not. All it's going to do is take me out of I want something that's going to take me out of the current emotion or feeling that I'm having because I don't like it. And so it's, and so now I can use ice cream to do that, or I can use online shopping. Like anybody can use anything to do that. But for wine, like maybe it's okay once in a while, but for those for people like me who have the gene that switched on when I put alcohol in my body, maybe, and I've used this example, like at the playground, moms can get together and drink wine, and which seems, whatever, but just odd. Like when your kids are there, they're playing and you're drinking
you got your
wine,
Stanley
but
cup,
like,
and you're like, what's in
yes, which I've heard is very common, even more common, at like baseball games and all of that stuff. So, maybe 4 moms are fine, but that one mom goes home and she can't stop. And then she finishes 2 more bottles, but she doesn't know, right? It's the same thing when I was in college. I assume everybody else is doing it or nobody's talking about it. And so it's normalized. But I think we're told, and there's research out there, numbers that talk about the amount of money that's geared towards women in the purchase of alcohol. I mean, it is astronomical. And so I don't think we're doing women justice or showing. And I have a friend who because I'm a little bit removed from that, and my mom friends and we don't do that. Like I don't drink wine at the playground. They don't drink wine at the playground. Like we drink water in our Stanleys. And so she was telling me she's newly sober, and she's like a year, 18 months. And so she was telling me the story about her mom group. They all drank together. And so all the girls were friends, their kids were friends too. And so they had this thing. And so when she stopped drinking, she kind of stopped hanging out with them because she realized that it was a problem amongst all the women. They cut her daughter out of the group. So not only is it impacting women and our mental health and our wellness, but now it's affecting our children.
Well, you see a lot. You see a lot of times with parents with younger children, they're kind of hanging out with the parents who are kind of doing the same things that they're doing. And then the kids are sort of like lumped together with that. Like, there's a lot of that socializing, and the drinking has a lot to do with it. I see it all the time.
And that's the part, I have my own opinions on it, but I don't see it as much because it's not my reality. But I don't, I saw this this meme that was like, what if we used cocaine instead of wine? Why needs cocaine at the end of the day to deal with you? It's like, that doesn't seem normal, but because alcohol is legal and you can walk into a store and buy it, and it's fine. It doesn't seem like it's the same, and it's just wine.
When you put it that way, and it really does kind of put a mirror up. And so now this sober curious movement that I think is fantastic, right? With all these, non-alcoholic, there's actually a non-alcoholic bar that opened here. Non-alcoholic, people like Jayla, like they're doing all kinds of non-alcoholic drinks and stuff like that. But that's got to be refreshing. I mean, it's refreshing for me to see where I'm like, this is kind of amazing.
I think it gives people options. And I think people are seeing, and there's a study out of Canada that shows actually alcohol is a toxin, period. It's not good for you. Whatever the compounding grapes, like in the wine, it's not. And so I think it's great to give people alternatives if they want to explore not drinking for health reasons, or, I have a friend who's younger and she's in her 20s, and she's like, I don't identify as an alcoholic, but I don't like to drink because I make bad choices when I drink. I don't black out, but I just do things I wouldn't normally do. And that doesn't seem like a healthy lifestyle either. I'm like, good for you.
Right.
It's great. And she's like, but it's really hard because people don't understand that. And they say, well, you're supposed to drink at 25. This is when you're supposed to have fun. And she's like, but I don't like it. It doesn't make me feel good.
But you're an outlier, and especially in college, because everybody's drinking. It's like kegs, keg stands and like party. I mean, I've done my share of keg stands. But the label alcoholic, here's where I think what's interesting. And I've said this to myself before, where it's like, okay, if you're a problematic drinker, like if drinking causes you problems, you can label yourself what you don't have to call. I think people don't want to say like, I'm an alcoholic. Whatever you want to call it, if it's causing problems and you're making bad choices, it's something you should probably examine, regardless of what you want to call yourself. Like I've heard, people get stuck in that where it's like, oh, but and that's the whole thing I wanted to talk about the rationalizing things.
Yeah.
Like whether it's just a tiny Sutter Home bottles, or I'm only drinking on the weekends, you're kind of moving those pieces around to make it in your mind okay. If drinking's causing a problem in your life, call it what you want, but you should probably take a look at it.
If we're going to be honest, right? Someone's eating too many cupcakes and they gain weight. We don't call them, I don't know, sugaraholic. Like we don't
Right.
call them that, but it's a problem and it's
Yep.
causing a problem in your life. And it is no different from alcohol. But the term alcoholic has such a negative connotation and brings that shame with it, right?
Yeah.
It's like, well, because I think people think it's a decision, right? And I've heard people say, well, you choose to put that in your mouth. And I'm like, but you don't understand. It's not. It is like a physical desire and craving that you can't quiet. And it's so much more than that. And so I know there's like a shift towards substance use disorder as a vernacular instead of the alcoholic, which has that negative connotation. But you're right. And it's funny because, not funny, in 12 Steps, to talk about that, you start to justify it. It's like, well, I'm only going to drink on the weekends. And then you start drinking on Monday. It's like, well, it's a Monday. I really deserve it. Or, oh, I'm going to only drink on the weekends. But let me bump that up to Thursday because everyone's going out to happy hour. And you start justifying it. And little by little, you start chipping away at those like soul promises that you've made yourself. I'm not going to do it. Or I'm only going to drink at home. And I did all that. I was like, I'm only going to drink at home so I don't drive. And then I get invited out. I'm like, well, just this one time. And then it's like a slippery slope. And you start kind of backing into those things that you said I'll never do, or I'm going to be different this time, or whatever that looks like. And it's a slippery slope.
Oh, slippery. Speaking of the 12 steps, I want to talk about that a little bit. Not only how brave it was for you to like make that call and start going to these meetings when you did feel, nervous and scared, like, wait, what's in there? Like, what awaits me in this church basement, right? All these scary, people under the bridge, if you will, that's what people think is like, they're different than me. I'm successful. I swim. I'm Hilary Phelps. Like I couldn't be with these people, you walk through that door and then it's those people who've probably taught you more about life than maybe anybody. And they're all just like you. They're all just like me. They're just us. Right. So what did you like? Talk about like when you walked in and what your first meeting. I'm sure you probably remember that.
Oh my gosh. So I've been to so to talk about that too, like we talk about the comparing your insides to someone else's outsides, right? So what I was feeling on the inside was scared, lonely, afraid, not good enough, shitty human, like all of those things. And so I would look at you and I'm like, she looks good. She's smiling. She has it together. She's better than me. And that's kind of what it's what I would do. Well, if you looked happy, then you must have everything together. Meanwhile, I'm burning alive on the inside. And so what I've realized is like, we're all going through life. Most people at some point or at one time are going through life with a mask on because we want to look good to other people and we want other people to think that we're fine. And we think like, so that's where like in, 12 steps is where like the vulnerability piece comes in. Cause it's like, I don't have my shit together all the time. And that's okay too. And it's okay. And, and I want people to look at me and be like, oh, well, if she doesn't have her shit together, then it's okay if I don't today. And that's where that like connection of other, I think is so important in community. But the first time I went in, it was actually a sweet story. I was seeing a therapist and she was like, do you think you have, and this is how I initially started thinking about getting sober. She said, do you think you have a problem with drinking? I was like, I don't know. I'm smart, right? I'm like, define problem. And she's like, do you think you drink too much? And I was like, no. She's like, how many she said, how many glasses of wine do you drink? Because I was like, I drink wine. How many glasses of wine do you drink a day? I'm like, 2. And she goes, okay. How big are your glasses? I'm like, man.
You're like, bitch,
you're good. Yeah, right? And so, and slowly it's just like, well, do you want to explore this option of, maybe trying 12 steps? I'm like, okay, like fine, begrudgingly, I'll do it for you. Like, I'll go for, you want me to go, I'll go for you. And she's like, when do you want to go? I'm like, next week. She's like, how about tomorrow? I'm like, tomorrow? Do they have them every day? She's, yeah, they have a lot of them. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay. So I showed up and she drove me. Like, she's the best. I still have her card. And so I was like, I should call her. I told Pete this and he was like, you should call her.
You really
like,
should.
Text her.
I know. I
her.
would listen to that and I was like, I really hope that I was hoping that you would, because people, that take that extra step, it's not, you don't get that all the time with people. So like people who really give a shit, I don't know.
And she showed
I think
up.
you should call her.
I should. Mm-hmm. And she drove me to my first meeting and I walked in and I had coffee, and I was so proud of myself because I didn't drink the night before. As I walk in, I had coffee, and I'm like, well, I don't want to drink my coffee in because what if someone in there thinks it has alcohol in it? And then what if they ask me and it's not, it's coffee? Like, I'm all in my head about this. I walk in and they have coffee and they have donuts and it's happy and people are laughing. And I was, oh my gosh. And this woman sat at the front of the room and she was talking about abuse. And she was talking about how she'd been abused. And I sat in the chair in the back corner and I'm like, you don't talk about these things. You don't open, you don't share, you keep that inside. You don't, why is she being so open about this? No. And that's when I, later ended up realizing that we're only as sick as our secrets, and the things that I can shame myself on the inside and not get out in the open and have people say like, I love you anyway, or you're okay the way you are. Despite of those things that have happened to you in the past or for you or the situations that you were in, I love you now. And you're like, what? And so sitting in the room and listening to that woman, I got up at the end of the meeting and I was like, I got to get out of here. This woman came and handed me a big book and I'm like, nope. She's like, tell me your story. Tell me what happened. And I'm like, I'm not going back there. I will not drink, but I'm not going back. And so for 3 months, I didn't take a sip of alcohol, and it's called white knuckling. And I was in so much angst because I thought once I removed the alcohol from my life, then perfect. It was going to be perfect. Sleeping was going to be great. My relationships were going to look beautiful. I was going to start thriving at work. All the things were going to happen. But what I realized was the alcohol was just something I used to mask the symptoms. Like I had all these other things inside of me. And we talk about lack of spiritual program. I thought I was the center of the world. I either thought I was like the best person in the world or I was the biggest piece of shit on the bottom of someone. Like there was no in between. There was no humility. There was no being humble. And so it was just so drastic. And so when I walked in, I'm like, I'm not going back. But I didn't realize, so I didn't realize all of those things were going to come up, and all the feelings that I drank over and had stuffed down for so long, they come out eventually, right? Because any feeling you try to, it's going to end up in trauma or sickness or disease or like all those things. And for me, it had they'd settled in the base of my stomach for so long. And I always thought I was happy and kind, and anger came out, and I had so much rage and so much fear. So I didn't go back. And then I'd go, and then I started drinking again. And all the things came back. I was the worst hangover I've ever had. I remember laying in bed for days just recovering, and it just got worse. And they talk about, or people in recovery will say, my disease is just waiting for me to come back. It's getting stronger, and it's just waiting. And the day I go back out and take that drink and give that disease the power, it wins, and it is going to be harder to come back.
Yeah.
And that's true. And just from the 3 months that I went out drinking and came back in 3 months, and I would do this little dance of 3 months in, 3 months out, 3 months, because it was my birthday, and you have to drink on your birthday, I thought. And so those meetings at first were just uncomfortable.
To say the least, right? To say the least. But that struck me when I was listening to a previous conversation that you had about how we mask what we're really feeling with alcohol. And I think a lot of people out there right now, until you take a step back and you think, oh, wait a minute, that's what I'm doing. Like you just feel like you need a release, and the alcohol makes you feel better. But if you really take a step further and say like, I am numbing and stuffing down the core, like the raw emotions of who I am, good, bad, and ugly with this alcohol. What if I removed it and allowed myself to just open up and let whatever comes out come out? Like when you said you were so angry and had all this rage, like were you just angry at yourself for letting yourself be? Like what was the rage and the anger? Did you even know, or you were like, it was just this?
And you hear this. I remember one woman so I'd go to women's meetings, and she's like, I threw a brick through a windshield today. And I'm like, what? I was so
brick?
angry. And so, yeah.
Jesus. I want her in my corner.
And so, but then hearing other people talk about, like, I don't know where this anger is coming from, but it's stuff. I mean, think about drinking for 15 years and all the emotions, right? Because what I've realized is that any situation or anything that's put in front of you, you can't go over it. You can't go under. You have to go through it. Because if you don't go through it, it's going to come up at some point later, right? And so sitting in those emotions and those uncomfortable feelings, nobody likes it. Nobody likes feeling sad. Nobody likes feeling pain. Nobody likes anger. But they're going to come out eventually. And so if we ignore them or move them to something else or do something to take us out of that feeling, it's going to show up in a different way, right? It's like a kettle, right? Like the steam has to come out some point. And so you can either do it now or you can do it later. And I think with alcohol, or we want it to, I've had a stressful day or I've had this really tough moment. I just want it to go away. And that's what we reach for instead of, going for a walk or calling a friend or, screaming into a pillow, which is incredible.
Really fun.
Or just someone was telling me the other day, like, I just lay on my bed and face down. I haven't tried that, and just kick and scream like a child. And it gets like somatically, it gets all of that stuff out. I'm like,
what was so the first step, which is basically admitting that your life is no longer manageable, right?
Powerless over
alcohol. Was that the hard? Is there a hardest step?
That's
like what?
That's the only one you have to do
hardest
perfectly.
step.
Right. Yeah.
I didn't know if maybe making amends, like I didn't know if there was one that was like, I know the admitting it has to be like the hardest, but is there any other in there where you were like, damn it, like this step sucks really bad, or all of them just kind of?
I mean, so every day it's like 1, 2, 3, what is it, 10, 11, so admitting you're powerless and that your life has become unmanageable. Without that, none of the other ones matter.
Right.
Because you have to admit that there's a problem, right? And then and realizing that I'm not the center of the universe. That there's something else out there, God, universe, spirit, source, whatever you want to call it. It's not me. I don't create things, and I can't play God, meaning I can't do things in order to make other, it's not my responsibility. I just have to worry about me. I have to worry about my side of the street, keeping my shit clean, like so, prayer and meditate every day, which is really powerful for me. Prayer is asking for help, like whatever that is, please, like just putting it out there. Please, I just need help. I'm struggling. Meditation is listening for the answers and the guidance. And then when you're wrong, promptly admitting it. So there are times literally, and someone said this to me in early sobriety, I don't do things because I don't want to make amends later. Keeps me in check sometimes when I want to fire off something nasty or be like, I'm like, I'm gonna have to make amends later.
No, it's right.
And I've had to do that recently, and I'm like, I don't want to do this. I'm like, just want to say I'm sorry I did that. I should not have said those words to you. It was not kind. And sometimes people are like, oh, thank you. Some people are like, yeah, you shouldn't. And you have to be like, "Ugh," and in that moment, you have to
right.
I did my part. Right. So
yeah,
I focus on my part.
That kind of reminds me of because my brother's, I think he's like 7 years sober.
Yeah.
But he always says, play back the tape. Like, you have to play, like if you ever feel like you have a craving or you like play the tape back, remember what you did, like just play back the tape. Like you don't want to have things.
And play it forward,
yeah,
like what it would look like.
Right.
I did that with my dad died because that was the closest I think I'd come to wanting a drink.
That was my next question was going to be, so does it.
I read your mind. We're so.
So when you go out to dinner,
yes.
like, and you see people drinking wine, like where are you right now with that? Or does it vary on like from day to day where you're like, damn, I'd like to have a drink? Or do you just kind of not, do you mind if somebody's drinking a glass of wine? Like, what is that like for you day to day?
Now I don't. In the beginning, it was hard. I didn't like being around alcohol. I didn't like being around people that were drinking. And it wasn't the drinking. It was the little things that you don't think about. It's the change in inflection in your voice when you start to have too much to drink and your voice changes. And so I'd notice that. I'm like, nope. Or you'd get close to someone after they'd been drinking wine, and wine was my thing. And so I'd smell the wine or I'd smell the cup. So those were the things that bothered me the most. In the beginning, I couldn't drink even water out of her wine cup. I would ask for them to change it in a restaurant because I loved, like, that was part of the experience for me, was a beautiful goblet and the beautiful red wine as it was pouring in, and the glass, like, it was the experience. Like, I liked that, or I thought I did. That was a romantic side of it, right? Let me be clear.
Yeah.
That was not really how it was. It's not really what I liked, but that's what my addiction would tell me. Like, oh, I loved the moments of this. And it was like, I didn't. If I had a choice, I would drink alone and get shit-faced and not talk to anybody. Like, if I'm being honest, but I use that as an excuse. Like, I use it, to go out with other people. And so seeing people drunk would be very triggering or uncomfortable early in sobriety. I still don't pour people drinks. I don't have it in my house.
Right.
Like, there's no need to.
Yeah.
So even if I was, entertaining, I don't provide alcohol. But at family Christmases or dinners or things like that, they, my extended family, they'll drink or they'll have a glass of wine, and that doesn't bother me. But I don't pour it, I don't open it, I don't buy it. And even with some of the non-alcoholic stuff, I don't in a restaurant, because I did that at one point and I had a gin and tonic, and they'd give me a gin and tonic.
They give you a real one? Oh boy.
And so and that's just a choice.
Oh yeah. And like for me too, it's like the mocktail. I mean, it's like, it's the ritual of it. It's like, if you're veering away from all that, it's like, why even go for a mocktail? It's like, I don't know.
I make them at home sometimes with juice, it's like and sparkling water.
And because
I have a pretty cup.
There is something about though, the ritual of, like you said, like the wine and the glass and things like that. If you are, enjoying a glass of something. But you're right. You were thinking that in your head, but really you got to the point where I remember the one thing you said you had, I don't know if you were exaggerating, but I would like to fact check this.
It's fact.
Was it 6 glasses in a half hour of wine?
And my addict will tell me I'm like, it's those little tiny glasses that you get in a hotel bar. It wasn't even the big ones. Like, yeah, it was 6.
So were you kind of just like
chugging? I was sitting at the bottom. I was sitting at the bottom of the end of the bar by the wall. It was a Holiday Inn Express or Holiday Inn or something across the street from my apartment in DC. Had 2 bottles of wine. It was the end of the night. I didn't have any more. And I'm like, this sucks. I wasn't drunk. I wasn't feeling anything. And so I went downstairs and walked across the street to this bar, and I sat, and the bartender's like, we're closing in 30 minutes. I'm like, great. Can I have a glass of wine? Can I have another? Can I have another? And it was 6. I didn't black out. I just got sick. Went home and got really sick, and it didn't work anymore. And so you hear people talk about that when it stops working, and it feels like it's failed you, because all of a sudden you can't get that, you don't get the outcome you're looking for, which is the numbness, the escape, the relief of any kind of pain, physical, emotional, spiritual, whatever that looks like. And it stopped working. I remember thinking, like, you failed me, this isn't working.
And then it was time. It was time.
Time.
So let's talk about what, like, you're traveling the country, like you're filling your cup with, like, going out and talking to people about this, which I think is incredible. What exactly is it specifically? Because I know that you said with women too, like the shame and the sobriety, like talk about some of the work that you're doing right now and how that's sort of giving you this purpose.
I mean, it's changed so much in the last year, because when I shared my story with Pete on his podcast, it was just one, and I was like, I wasn't sure what it would look like. And I got so many notes from people, my mom was an alcoholic, and it was so hard. Your son is so lucky. Like, or my brother, died of addiction. My brother killed himself because he was an addict. Like, there's so many messages that come and say, thank you for speaking. I'm struggling with sobriety. Hearing your story helps me feel less alone. So those stories that came in after were just so powerful. And then, like, one podcast, another, and all of a sudden I'm like, maybe this is my purpose. And maybe this is what it means, just to share my story and to help people feel less alone. And so from that, I've had women come up. I was at a Christmas with my mom and my son last year, and a woman came up and she's like, I saw your story, and because of you, I've just, I was just a wine drinker too. And so I'm going to try to stop drinking. And it took her about 7 months to get it, but she checks in every now and again, and she's like, I'm still hanging, but what I realized was there's no representation of, I think, sober women, and I think there needs to be there are a lot of wonderful women talking about it. But I think the more people that can lend their voice to the cause, or to say, like, this isn't a choice. It doesn't make you a bad person. There's nothing shameful about it. The more people that can speak openly and help other women see that, the more powerful it is. And, women, you're a mom, like, we take on, Eve Rodsky calls it invisible labor. Like, we take on stuff because it's just what we do. And we say, and I think that's also why women, like, just put it on my tray. I've got it. Like, I'll just handle it. Like, it's just one more, it's not a big deal. I've got it. Like, I'll do it. And then when it comes to things like treatment or asking for help, we also think, I got it. I don't need help. I got it. Right. And so, and there's also women going to treatment is hard. It's hard for a woman to go away for 30 days. Like, you know, because we justify it and we're like, well, my kids are going to suffer. Or my husband's not going to be able to, I mean, he can't make them dinner for 30 days, whatever. But the flip side of that is, but think of how much benefit and impact you'll have on your family and your children and your husband for going away for 30 days, because there's no longer that chaos or that eggshells or that fear of who's going to show up, you know? And so now it's transitioned, and meaning, you know, I still do public relations, but I speak to women. I also work with women in a coaching capacity and any like going through transition, meaning to find their voice and live in their truth. Because for me, that was what I found through alcohol and through, you know, other things. I stopped listening to my voice and my intuition. And I said, well, you're an alcoholic, so your intuition doesn't matter, and your voice is flawed and it's wrong. And once I got silent, for me, like meditation was really powerful. And I worked with a coach, and she also helped me find that, you know, that's not okay, or tell me why it feels that way. And so I was able to start finding my voice again and using that. And I think for me, I had not trusted that voice for so long, and just being able to use it and to say it and to trust it was so powerful. And I want to be able to give other women that same opportunity to feel empowered and live in their truth, whatever that looks like, and know that they're not alone. Because I think women thrive in community. We need each other. And there's this culture of like, did you see the Barbie movie?
No, but I need to. I know, I've heard
monologue. I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
It's like, you're supposed to be pretty, but not too pretty. Talk about money, but not too much, because it's rude. You don't want to be too skinny, but you want to be healthy, but you actually really need to be skinny. And I'm like, oh my gosh,
you can't win.
You can't win. And then there are the women that out there that are tearing you down because, you know, versus let's just support people.
Yeah.
Let's just support everybody that's struggling.
Well,
and that's very pie in the sky, but I believe it's possible.
Yeah. And I think I speak for a lot of people when I say, I'm so glad that you started to tell your story. And I just know the ripple effect of what you're doing is going to be, and is right now, just incredible for so many people out there who don't feel like they can, you know, get help. So I think it's amazing. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
Do you have any other last sage words of wisdom before we close out?
Oh my gosh.
Where can people find you? Because I know you do. I mean, you talk to people all the time. Like if someone, you know, emails you or DMs you or whatever, I mean, you're
try on it. And if there's a woman struggling, I'll give her my phone number, and I'm like, let's do a Zoom if I don't know her. You know, if it's just you know, someone that I've met on social, I'm like, great, let's do a Zoom, or let's, you know, have a conversation. I try really hard to answer everything that comes through, and offer that support. And if I can't offer support or don't have an answer, the great thing is I have so many resources and people that I can be like, I don't know, let me find out, or let me connect you with, you know, I don't know about a detox in New York, but I've got a great group of people I work with. Let me send you that way.
So HilaryPhelps.com would be a good start, right?
Yeah, there's a question. Hilary. Yes, that's a great place. HilaryPhelps.com.
Or at Hilary Phelps
__
on
Instagram.
Yeah.
Those are great places.
Well, thank you so much. I know you've had a packed weekend here in C-Bus. So for the fact that you came in for an hour to spend time with me means a lot. And for what it's worth, I'm really proud of you. And if you're still out there following your girl, please follow me on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, keep moving. Thank you.